Guys, good evening. Second video of the day. I'm dropping this video based on SanDisk. So many of you asked me to just give you my high-level thoughts of what I thought today, what caused the stock to drive down, and the actions that we saw in the market. So I'm putting this video out a little late on the East Coast. I hope you enjoy it, but let's jump in and get started. So I want to cover three big things that I saw that I think influenced the position or influenced the action of SanDisk today and put pressure on the stock. Two of them put pressure. One actually relieved the pressure and the bulls stepped back in. But let's jump over and take a look at the graph. And you can see on your screen that I've pulled up the action for the day. And what a great start for the day. You can see SanDisk came out. We actually hit a high of 684 at one point. But then we immediately had a half an hour, 45-minute period of just kind of pressure and pullback we saw for the stock. This, in my opinion, is the Western Digital, the overhang of the remaining shares. We know last week on February 18th that they released or exchanged the 5.8 million shares they had of SanDisk. And if you remember, I mentioned that this wasn't the final divorce. They still had about 1.7 million shares remaining. Now, the 5.8 they issued through JP Morgan and Bank of America, but they still have that 1.7. And clearly on their last earnings call for Western Digital, their CFO said that their intention was to be completely divested or completely removed of any equity of SanDisk or shares by the 1-year anniversary. Today, I believe, marks that 1-year anniversary. So it's my belief that these shares, the additional 1.7, were offloaded in the beginning of the market today. Remember, these will be treated differently. They'll be treated with the Rule 144, which means they will be dribbled out in the private equity markets. They won't be handled through JP Morgan and Bank of America. So a little more difficult to track for us there. But the biggest clue for me is that Western Digital, number one, they said they had this full intention to have all of these shares offloaded their balance sheet by the 1-year anniversary. And in the majority of time, management typically hits these deadlines to clean up their books for the next fiscal market. It's a clear indicator for the street and for the analysts monitoring this company. But two, their credit rating changed today. So earlier today, Western Digital had their credit rating upgraded from S&P to a BBB negative. And usually credit ratings will not happen, or these types of upgrades won't happen until a company clears its major debt milestones. And selling off a massive equity stake in SanDisk would be a major debt milestone that they had. And that would definitely be indicative of a credit rating we saw today. So I think that's the first piece that we saw in the beginning, is just this overhang effect that was flooding the market a bit and caused a little bit of pressure on the stock. The second one was clearly the Citron Research announcing that they're going to short SanDisk. And that happened between 11 and 2 p.m. You can see it right on your screen there. The second red candles dropping down in pressure. Citron it was a coordinated attack with Western Digital and Citron that created this perfect storm for the stock today. They announced that they were shorting SanDisk based on the current NAND flash storage as a supply mirage. They're arguing that the market is treating SanDisk like NVIDIA, except that SanDisk sells a commodity. And their belief is that Samsung is actually getting ready to flood the market with chips, trying to reclaim their 50% margin and ending the scarcity cycle that drove the 1,200% return for SanDisk. We'll see more about that in a second in the video. But the last signal that I think most people missed is right at the end of the day when the bulls stepped back in clearly, when we started to test the floor with SanDisk, and the bulls pushed it back up to where we closed at 638.52. The reason the bulls stepped in is what a lot of the bears are missing, and a lot of the major news cycles tend to be missing, is that while Citron claims supply is coming, industry insiders know that Samsung has been struggling with its wafer yield on the next generation chips. SanDisk's joint supply with Kioxia out of Japan has secured a stable supply of their 218-layer NAND, which is already sold out for this year. So SanDisk is actually in the process of planning a significant price hike for their SSD, for their enterprise SSDs. And that would be the exact opposite of the Citron Research. That would be the exact opposite of a collapsing market. That would be showing major pricing power. So as I jump back and kind of closing for this, I would say that the good news is that the the Western Digital story for SanDisk is basically over. The market has absorbed those shares, it looks like now, and moving forward, SanDisk, they will be driven and measured by two things: NAND pricing and whether Citron's short thesis actually gains traction with other institutional investors. What I'm going to look for tomorrow with SanDisk specifically is, let's see, and I feel like we're going to have a gap up right out of the gates. It should open and kind of get into that mid 640 range because of the power inflows that we saw at the end of the day. Those bulls that stepped back in and pushed that up over the floor of 630 that we saw, the institutional investors stepped in. And after we saw at the end, there was many hours of just stability with the stock. That gives me a signal that the Citron Research short report has been fully digested by the market. So we have to see if the stock fails to hold 635. If it goes underneath 635 in the first 15, 30 minutes of the market, this suggests that Western Digital's debt to equity selling pressure isn't quite finished, and it may test a low again. It may push lower down to that 615 range. But the thing that we also have to remember, just keep in mind, listen and look for pre-market, keep an eye on pre-market headlines for Samsung. Because if Citron's case relies purely on Samsung flooding the market. However, if there's any news that leaks of continued yield issues for Samsung's plant, SanDisk will skyrocket tomorrow. So tomorrow overall, I believe SanDisk will have a green day. They'll finish in the positive. The massive earning guidance that they have with EPS with earnings per share of 12 to 14 in the next quarter is a fundamental gravity that is too strong for one single short report to stop and hold down for too long. So my opinion is we'll have a green day tomorrow with SanDisk. I hope you guys enjoyed the quick report.